Hi, I'm Chris Grainger and welcome back to the Mi9 build. Okay, so we've got the diff to put together now. I'll show you how I do it. It's pretty much as the instructions. This is a great diff. It's a great design, well made, really nice tight tolerances. There's no backlash, nice and smooth. Diff's a very important part of the car. And it's a part that you want to, pay a bit of attention to when you're building because you want it to be consistent. You want to know that the only changes are the oil. So if you put a thick oil, it's going to be stiffer, and if you put a thin oil, it's going to be softer. And you want to know that it's just the oil that's making the change. So you want to, just take your time, make sure everything's put together properly. And I'll just show you how I do it and give you a few little tips on the way. Okay, so the first thing I do is just check that the outdrives are a nice, smooth, and free turning in the plastic part, basically in the actual diff half. So just take the outdrive and then just pop it in there and just make sure it's free. Now I'm fully expecting yours to be perfectly fine. 99% of the time they're absolutely fine, but occasionally you will get a bit of flashing just from the mold around this hole here. So if you've got a little bit of bind and it's a little bit stiff, just take a scalpel, X-Acto knife, and just lightly run it around the inside edge just to take the flashing away from the hole. And that will definitely fix the problem if there's one there. And you're just making sure that it's nice and free and there's no bind at all. Now once you've done that on both sides, we're pretty much ready to assemble. There's no modifications that need doing, nothing really else to check. So all we're going to do is pop it all together as per the instructions. Now I've pre-soaked this O-ring in shock oil, diff oils rather. When I say pre-soak, it's not been sat there soaking for a set amount of time. I've basically wetted it just as I'm building the diff, just so it's lubricated, just so that you don't catch it when you're putting it together, or nick it, or take a slice out of it. Everything will go together smoothly and you won't damage the O-ring. I'm using the Core RC 7000 oil in this diff. Obviously diff oil is going to change depending on your track, weather conditions, whether it's hot or cold, low grip, high grip. In the UK, we're generally somewhere between 4,000 and 8,000. It's very rare we're below 4,000, and it's rare we're above 8,000. So I'm building this with 7. I know that the next track I'm going to want a 7 to try, so that's what I'm going to do. So like I say, I've pre-wetted the O-ring, and now I'm just going to pop it together basically as the instructions. So we're going to put the small washer on first. Now this washer is important, so don't leave this off, or leave it out by mistake. This is where the bearing will run up against. So without this washer, you're going to have all sorts of problems because the bearing is going to hit on these lugs basically. So that's together there, and then we're going to pop the O-ring on. And then what I like to do is just put a bit of grease on the shaft here. So this is the Core RC lithium grease. And I'm just going to put a very small amount just around the shaft there. I think that anything that's got something moving or rubbing should always have a bit of grease. And the O-ring is obviously stopping the oil coming out, so this shaft should stay dry. We just pop that in like that. Now the next thing I'm going to do is put on the bearing on the outside and fit the outdrive, and I'll show you why in a minute. So the way I like to do these is I don't like stretching the O-ring over the whole thing. I mean, it's perfectly fine, but it's just not how I like to do it. So the way I do it is I pop the pin in the hole like that, and then I stretch the O-ring across there in the groove, and then just make sure that the pin is out so the hole is clear. And that basically sits there then. It's you can manipulate it around, get it in place. No problem at all. That's pretty stable. So we're going to pop that on. You just slide it on and then just wriggle the pin until it slots into the hole, push it in, and then the O-ring just sits back around it. Now the reason I put that on first is because I find it easier to then put the gears on. These gears fit on a peg which is machined as part of the outdrive. It's not a pin that goes through, it's a peg that's been machined as one piece. And this is brilliant because it takes all the play away basically. It's a square peg which perfectly fits in the slots in the gear, so you don't get any slop backwards and forwards, but obviously it's a tighter fit. So what you can do is pop that on there and then hold the gear and turn this until it slips into place like that, and then it's easier to get on. And it's much easier this way when you've got this half which is right down inside, because you can basically put your finger in there, hold the gear still, turn the outdrive, and there you go, it clicks into place. Rather than fumbling it around trying to find the location, you sort of like turn it until it clicks into place. Right, then we can just pop this O-ring around on the outside, and then just pop the middle gears together just as instructions. I wouldn't recommend changing any of the shimming in this diff. In my opinion, it's perfect. You've got the perfect amount of back play and freeness. It's just a lovely diff. We pop the shims on the outside like so, and then just pop that inside. There we go. Right, now the next thing is to bring in the scales. Okay, so I'm going to pop this on the scales, turn this on. There we go. And I'm going to zero this, and then I'm going to put 1.5 grams of oil in. I think the instruction says 1.6, but I go with 1.5 just because I think it makes less mess basically. It sinks down easier, and I think 1.5, 1.6, it's about the same basically, but a little bit less messy with 1.5, so I tend to go with 1.5. So I'm just going to squeeze this in now. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that I get some of the oil down the backs of these gears in the little slot there, just so that you get as much of the oil staying in basically. You don't want any of it coming out when you screw it all together. I'm going to keep going until we get to 1.5. There we go, 1.51. I think we can say that's close enough. Right, now the next thing I'm going to do is basically just let that sit. Just let it sit for about 5-10 minutes, just so the oil sinks down. The air sort of comes out just so the oil sinks further in, basically, so that when you put the top on, you don't then just squidge all the oil out. There's absolutely no need to put it in a shock pump. The diffs have got air in them. They're a mixture of oil and air. So if you suck the air out, then when you screw it together and turn it, the air is straight back in again. So it's completely pointless. So you may as well just let it sit for 5 minutes, let the level sink down, and then we can screw it all back together.